All right, now that our bodice shell is sewn together and our lining is sewn together, we can go ahead and combine the two, okay? There's lots of different methods and ways to do it. I'm going to show you two different methods. I'll use one method on the bottom or hem of the bodice and then a different method on the neckline of the bodice, okay? So let's go ahead and we'll start by combining the two, and we'll do the method, the bottom. All right, so the method we're going to use on the bottom of this is going to be edge to edge. That's where you sew the lining and the outside shell and the fashion fabric together, and you just sew them together without using a facing or bias binding or anything like that. You just sew the lining right to the outside shell. Okay, so that's the method we'll be using on the bottom. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and put right sides together. So here's the right side of my bodice. Here's the right side of the lining. We're going to put those two right on top. Flip this around. And I'm going to start at center front. Okay, I have a notch here at center front on my fashion fabric and one here on my lining. Let me just make one of my fashion fabrics. There we go. Okay, there's our two notches that indicate center front at the bottom. And we're going to start by pinning those together. Okay, and now we're just going to work our way out to center back. All right, so I'll go in one direction, pin out that direction, and then come back and do the other direction. For the most part, your seams should be matching up, and it looks like they are. If there's a little bit of ease, meaning one's a little longer than the other, that's okay, as long as it's not too much. Again, these are different fabrics, different interfacings. They're going to stretch or not stretch differently, and that's okay. Okay, this is side seam here. Let's keep going. Usually you can, if you need to, slightly stretch one layer to fit the other, but not too much. If it's way off, then there's probably an issue, and I wouldn't force it. Okay, so here's my center back. Right here's my center back notch, right there. Okay, so my closure, or my zipper, is going to go somewhere around there. All right. Again, we're creating a couture bodice. It means we're fitting it to somebody specifically. All right, so one of the last things, or basically the last thing to go in, will be the closure, in this case the zipper. Okay, so we need to leave this open for a certain amount. All right, so again, here's my center back notch right here. My closure is probably going to go somewhere, within a half inch or so of that notch. Okay, and I won't know until I pin it on the form or client or whoever this is being made for. Okay, so I'm going to leave about 1.5 inches open, 1.5 inches to 2 inches open. So when I go to sew this bottom edge shut, I'm not going to sew all the way back, all the way to my center back notch. I'm going to stop about 1.5 inches to 2 inches away. Okay, and that will make it so we can get our closure in there, and then we can go ahead and close all that up once the zipper's in. All right, so that's as far as I'm going on this side. I'm going to go ahead and pin out to the other side now. Again, coming back to center front and pinning out in that direction. Lining up my seams as best I can. And again, on this side, our closure is going to go at center back. So we're only going to pin to about 2 inches away from center back to allow us to do that correctly. Okay, that looks good. Actually, there we are. All right, so there we've done it. We've pinned from center front around, and we stopped about 1.5 inches to 2 inches from our center back. Okay, so now we can go to the sewing machine and actually stitch this together. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, we're at the machine. Let's go ahead and stitch this. And again, I'm starting here. Okay, my center back is up here. I'm starting about 2 inches away. I'll back tack and then continue stitching all the way until I get to the other side. So again, I'm just sewing the two together. And that's basically it. It's very... pretty straightforward. Alright, here we are. I'm going to stop again about 1.5 inches, 2 inches away from center back. Tack that. And there we go. Alright, so we've gone ahead and stitched the two together at the bottom. See what it looks like. Alright, so now what we need to do is, you notice we have all these curves. Again, we're going to fold this. Right now we have right sides together. We're going to fold it out so we have wrong sides together when it's finished. But what I want to do now is I want to go ahead and clip through all these curves so that when it folds wrong sides together, those curves can, the seam allowance at those curves can pull away accordingly and give us nice clean curves. So let's go back to the cutting table and do that. So a couple things I'm going to do here before I start clipping this seam is where all my seam allowances are, okay, when they're coming through this bottom edge. So here's my stitching line, okay, along the bottom edge. Anything that's past that stitching line for seam allowances, I'm going to trim out just to reduce the bulk in there. Because this, with all the interfacings, the layers of fabric, the boning, which shouldn't be in there, can really create a lot of bulk. And this will kind of clean that up. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and clip about every 1/2 inch or so. And again, these are all these curves. Whenever you flip a curve inside out, that seam allowance wants to be able to pull away from itself. If you don't clip it, it won't be able to pull away from itself. And you won't get a nice curve when it's flipped right side out. Okay, so it's actually these inward curves that want to fold away from itself and outward curves that actually want to fold in towards themselves or push in towards themselves. And by clipping it, it allows it to do all that. Okay, and very important, make sure you're clipping right down to your stitching, but not through your stitching. If you don't clip all the way to the stitching, you won't get the results that you want. Okay, there we go. Alright, so now we can bring this like so. Alright, we're not going to fold it all the way inside out yet, because now what we want to do is understitch our lining. Okay, so understitching, when we understitch, we're actually catching all the layers of seam allowance, so fashion fabric seam allowance and lining seam allowance. And we're catching that seam allowance through on the lining side. Okay, and when we do this, we're going to stitch about 1/16 of an inch away from the seam we just sewed. Alright, so let's go ahead and do that now. All right, we're back at the sewing machine. Let's go ahead and understitch. We're going to make sure that the seam allowance is going towards our lining side. And when I stitch, I'm going to pull the lining and the fashion fabric in two opposite directions, nice and tight, so I get a nice, clean, tight seam there. I'm not going to understitch right where I stopped sewing. I'm actually going to come away from that a little bit. And I'm going to understitch about 1/16 of an inch away from that seam that I just sewed on the lining side. Here we go. I'm going to be periodically checking to make sure that the seam allowance isn't flipping towards my fashion fabric layer, but stays on the lining side. It's going to be a little bit of a pain to do with the boning in and everything. You have to really shove it under the machine. Kind of throw you off course sometimes, but it shouldn't be too bad. Just make sure you continue to pull the lining and the fashion fabric in two opposite directions as you do this. And that the seam allowance is continuing to stay folded towards the lining. You can notice I keep pausing and checking. I'm checking underneath my garment. Feel too. Here I'm getting towards center front. It really wants to kind of flip under the other side. I have this curve here that really wants to fight me. But again, just keep manipulating it. It may seem like it's not going to be nice in the end, but it is. Okay, here's center front where my 3 bones are. You gotta watch because those bones can really push you off course. This is one of the reasons it's really important to stay about 1/8 to 1/4 away from the edge with your boning, because if you don't, you'll be sewing right over your boning. Pull some of this basting out of the way. Okay, we're getting close here. This is where I stopped stitching when I sewed the fashion fabric and lining together, so I'm going to stop stitching about 1 inch or so away from there. There we go. Alright, let's go back and we can press this. Okay, so let's go ahead and you can kind of see what this is looking like. Here's the inside of it. We're going to fold this so it's wrong sides together. Okay, and now because I clipped and I understitched, you can see this is almost folding or falling right into place. And one of the things that understitching does is it's supposed to bring back about 1/16 of an inch of that fashion fabric to the wrong side, so you get a nice clean finish on the right side. Okay, so last step we have to do here is press this. I'm going to make sure it's folding back that 1/16 of an inch. And if it looks like it's more, I'm going to push it back to the right side. And if it's less, I'm going to pull it back to the wrong side. There we go. And we'll just give that bottom edge a nice press from the lining side. I like to do this over a ham so I can get a nice clean press around these curves. Kind of form them just like it would be around the human body. If those basting stitches start getting in your way, you can take them out. Usually you wait until the garment's done, but at this point we're getting close, and more than likely we're not going to have to worry about taking that apart. That we'd still need them. Okay. Getting almost to the last edge here. There we go. So there's the wrong side of it. Okay. And I'll flip it over and you can see the right side. Now it might not look amazing right now, but it's not done. But it's definitely getting there. And it'll look even better when it's on the form. Going around the body it's been shaped to. Alright, so that is how we're finishing the lining to the fashion fabric at the bottom edge. It's called an edge-to-edge finish. Okay? Alright, in the next video we will go ahead and do the neckline, and we're going to do that with a bias facing. Alright, so I'll see you in the next video.